Okay, welcome back to another episode of Words That Kill, and today we're talking serial killers and the methods they have of offing our favorite characters. And our guest today is horror and fantasy author Kim Richards, and I'm going to turn it over to her now and let her introduce herself. So take it away.
Hi, I'm Kim Richards. I've been writing for, 40 years now, maybe longer. I do have a serial killer story that was released in the early 80s, and I've re-released it just recently in audio and in ebook. It's called Death Mass.
So how do you go about crafting a serial killer? Because I know I've done several myself, so I'm just curious as to how you approach creating the killer character.
I think for me, it's all about what their motivation is, because why they want to kill somebody, it makes a difference on where they go and who they see and how they react. And so you kind of got to start with, why do they want to kill somebody,
Yeah, so that does lead me into the next question, is the pathology of what drives the character. So what is the pathology that drives your character?
The one I have a female serial killer. She's a little different. The women are a little different than men, but the one in my book, she grew up with an abusive childhood and with her brother and his friends, and started just trying to get revenge, and it followed her into her adulthood.
The revenge motive is, so did she get revenge on the original person that she had the beef with and then just continue it on? Or
she started with her brother and then went to his friends, and then from there, and then they caught her before she got too bad. But
okay. So do you read serial killer fiction, or do you avoid it?
Oh no, I love it. I love it. I'm fascinated with why people do things they do.
So if you were going to write more of it, how would you approach, say, maybe a more graphic serial killer, or someone who was into torture, or would you go the torture route or the no torture route?
I think I would, but it would depend on if the character needs it. If I could do it without it, then it's the same thing with sex and bad language. If you don't need it for the story, then don't. But if it's important, then absolutely.
So, so basically, you think that the violence levels are story by story.
I think so.
Would you prefer, if you were writing a killer, to approach it from the psychological point or from the violence point? Which would be your preference?
I think that the determinant on that would be whose point of view am I writing it from? Because if it's about them as opposed to from their eyes, it's going to be a whole different perspective. As far as from what other people see, it's going to be the violence. But I'm not afraid of either. I think that's part of what makes them fascinating, and part of what makes us afraid of them is the violence. So you can't look away.
So when you're choosing your victims, because obviously you're doing it from the point of view of the female serial killer, so your victims were male. But when you're choosing the victims, how do you go about? Do you want your victims to be disliked, or do you choose the victims that are the characters will empathize with? The readers will empathize with the most.
I think in this story, Death Mass, there are definitely victims are people that are not very good individuals. So I don't have any problem with them getting whacked off, because I don't like them either. But in future stories, I don't see why you couldn't do somebody that's likable, because, like I said, depending on their motivation, they could be picking people who are good people on purpose.
Yeah, marrying the real life serial killers would be an example if you were doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, and so many of them just pick their victims for weird reasons. Like, I forget the name of one guy who would walk down the street and try all the doors, and when he found one open, that was his victim's house. So just sometimes it seems really random.
Yeah, I think that was the BTK killer, or
I don't remember.
I think that sounds like that one. I'm not sure if I got the initials right though, but I think.
Yeah, I think he's the one that left a note on somebody's bed that said, "Sorry you weren't home, I was," or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a lot of shows with a lot of serial killers, and so I hate to say they sort of blend together, but they do kind of.
Yeah, I do. I watch a lot of shows like that too.
Yeah. What attracts you to the serial killer motif of writing?
Just wanting to know why somebody would do what they do, and some of that I find out for myself in the research, but then that becomes part of the story. But it's interesting to why people can grow up in the same place, same town, same experiences, and do something like that where somebody else doesn't. So it's interesting to me.
With you using the female serial killer, I mean, most people don't associate women with being serial killers, although there have been several throughout the course of history, more than most people probably realize. I mean, the most famous one, of course, being Eileen Wuornos. But so why did you decide to go with a female serial killer as opposed to the more traditional male killer?
Because I started looking into serial killers and found out that women are better at it, and that sounds really terrible, but they tend to get away with it longer, have higher victim counts because they don't get caught and they don't talk about it. And so I thought that was something worth exploring because it's a little less usual.
Yeah, it's. I think part of that. Would you agree that the society does not view women as that serial killer material?
Oh yeah, when you've got the mercy killers from the past, in the hospitals.
Mm.
And I remember an old story from the Civil War where some ladies had brought in soldiers and fed them poison mushrooms, but they routinely brought them home for dinner. So to me that falls under that realm, but they weren't ever arrested for it.
Yeah, and I've read several cases in history as well where the women they're sort of murdering their husbands in succession. And nobody kind of put it together, like three, four husbands down, they finally get caught.
Yeah, you'd think after the second one they'd be like, wait a minute.
Yeah, and then there was a TV movie, I think it's called Dark Angel, about the serial killer, Victorian serial killer female in England, and I think she offed a husband or two, several children. She offed some children of some people she worked for, like she was a governess or a nanny or something, and then just a couple of other random people she didn't like. And it's like nobody paid attention to this. Like people are dropping around this woman like flies, and no one paid attention because they didn't conceive that a female could be that vicious.
Always thought I'd died on the pit.
Like my dad.
I thought he was a publican.
My real dad. Put him in a wheelbarrow and brought him home to my mum in a sack labelled property of South Etton Coal Company. I was 8 years old. I said then I'll never be a miner's lass as long as I live.
Once you had me. You didn't want me. Did you, love?
Here. If I took more of this tea.
Sarah, go and help me. coming. Help me coming.
You're all right.
And I thought that that's an interesting way to explore, because I've done it a couple of times myself in some of my stories.
I just think people just make assumptions and they don't even go down that path.
As far as the killing off the characters go, what kind of methods did you use, and what kind of methods would you like to explore in future serial killers?
In Death Mask, my character is a nurse, and so she has access to drugs, and so she pretty much paralyzes them and then buries them alive.
Oh, that's a good one.
And it's called Death Mask because she makes a clay mask of them before she covers them up. So she's got, their features hanging on her wall.
So that's basically her trophy?
Yeah. She's kind of an artist, but she does it like she's doing death masks like they did in his history. So, and just hangs them in her basement wall.
What methods would you like to explore in future serial killer books?
I really don't know. Like, it's like for me, writing is like once I get a starting point, everything starts to evolve from there. And so, like, if I figure out what the motive's going to be, then that starts giving me directions of how they're going to kill them, and where they live will make a difference on where they can take bodies or what they have access to. And so, it's kind of the research is what forms the story for me.
Okay, speaking of research, what kind of research do you do for her murderers? Yes, give us all the research insights we want to know.
Well, I read lots of books, and I do watch some of the forensics TV shows and stuff. They're pretty interesting. I don't think it's a Facebook group. It's an email group called Crime Scene Writers that I like to get on, because anybody on there asks questions of different professionals. And so even if I don't have a question at the time, I'm reading everybody else's questions. And sometimes I'm like, ooh, that's a good idea. Or, I could use that here. So just, having access to talk to other people makes a difference.
So what little tidbits of research did you use in your book?
Most of the killings in my book take place in a metro park. And when I wrote the very original manuscript, I was living across the street from one. And I kept going and walking through. It was in Ohio, and I was from New Mexico, and so it's a big terrain difference. And so I kept walking through the park going, man, I could stick a body over there, and I could stick one in there. And so I started talking to the park rangers and stuff and asking them, questions like, how many people do you get coming through here? How come we never hear about things in the news? Does anybody ever get robbed? And kind of found out there's a lot that happens that just never get reported. And so that kind of gave me the idea to just make use of something that was right there near me that really could happen.
Okay, yeah, the spooky park idea I can get, because that would be a nice atmosphere, and a lot of people would think that would be a dangerous place for a woman to walk in at night, especially. So, but your character victims are male, so did you play on that at all?
A little bit, but mostly it's got the park. I did research on all metro parks in Ohio and states around, and took little features from some of them. One of them had a cemetery because it was originally a family plot, so that's in my story. And there were jogging trails and some other things. And so that's where she would catch some of her victims, was coming down the jogging trails.
Okay, so do any of the deaths take place in the cemetery? I gotta ask.
Actually, no. A rabbit.
Missed opportunity there, perhaps.
In the parking lot, though, of the Metro Park, yes.
Okay, so what's the most violent death that occurs in the book?
I would think when she kills her brother.
So she's getting out her aggression on that one.
Yeah, and that's her very first one. That's when she's like finally just crossed that line.
So when you're writing the killer, how do you get into the head of the killer? Is it just, does it come to you, or is it very clinical, or do you get into it emotionally, or and when you come out of it, are you disturbed, or does it bother you at all?
Well, I just doing the research on serial killers made me a little disturbed. I started going, there's some awful people out there.
Yeah.
The other thing I do when I write is I create a soundtrack, because that gives me something to write to, and I try to pick songs. And I actually found 2 or 3 songs about serial killers that I put in my playlist. And so there were times I was singing along going, wow, I shouldn't be singing these lyrics, things like, I feel good about you not telling anyone and stuff like that. So, but it does give me some insight into how other people think.
Okay, so speaking of the research, what's the weirdest thing that you found out about a serial killer?
But originally, that most of them are very intelligent. I mean, you see so much stuff on the news where they're just some big old dumb guy, and really a lot of them are very intelligent and know how to manipulate other people, how to get out of things.
Yeah, because I know I was going through a list. There was some list of the serial killers through history, and the weirdest thing I noticed is how many of them were actually cannibals.
Oh, I didn't realize. I knew that.
Yeah, I didn't either till I read that list. And there's quite a few of them that actually ate their victims, which is very, very disturbing, I think. But yeah, because I mean, you hear like Jeffrey Dahmer comes to mind as far as that. But I mean, so is there anything that you read during your research that, kind of like, no, don't want to ever touch that?
Probably anything that had to do with small children or infants. I don't think I want to go there.
Yeah, that's understandable. When you're killing your characters, has any character ever gotten a reprieve?
No.
Okay,
Oh,
just
no,
like
wait,
me.
take that back. That I did. Because in Death Mask, when my main character runs across the female serial killer, he runs across her in the middle of trying to kill somebody else, and so she lets him go, but not because she's still focused on this other guy.
So the bystander got lucky, did he?
I think so. Well, I think
Okay.
that's because she already had somebody. She'd already injected him, so she was halfway there. So.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here. Okay, so, well, thank you for being here today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this.
And be sure to tune into the next episode of Words to Kill. So that's all for now.